Alyona Minkovski, host of RT's The Alyona Show, is joining me. Alyona, we've been learning more and more over the last few days about this kill list that President Obama has been personally involved in the signing off process in. And we've heard about the nomination process. We've heard about kind of the broad range of people that might find themselves on this list. And we've also been hearing about this idea that although kill or capture is usually the letter of the law, it seems there's only been, as far as I know, only one person actually captured, and it seems it may be because of how complicated it is. If you actually do capture someone, then what happens? We know what's going on with the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed trial and the entire circus that can start if you actually end up having to try one of these people. Give me first your thoughts on the progressive response to this, which is interesting because I've been following it also. We saw a split progressive response to the killing of Osama bin Laden. What's your thought on the progressive response to the kill list?
I mean, if you ask me, I feel like the response to the kill list amongst progressives has been completely non-existent, and that's one of the most ridiculous, one of the most ludicrous things about this entire situation is that, of course, if this were a Republican that was in office, if we look back to a lot of the critique that was geared towards the Bush administration for torture, for Guantanamo Bay, for the war in Iraq, where are the progressives now? Why do they suddenly think it's okay if a Democratic president is doing this? Because you have to think about the magnitude of what all of this really means, right? This is a really disturbing, scary, horrible step, if you ask me, in the wrong direction. I mean, here you have a president that sits in his chambers and chooses who he's going to execute. That sounds like a dictator, right? That sounds like a king. That does not sound like a democratically elected president. We have an entire system set up in order for things like that not to happen, specifically if you want to talk about Anwar al-Awlaki or his 16-year-old son, specifically with American citizens. And so, you know, we were talking about this on my show last night. And if you take that into account, it's not a kill list, it's a murder list, and there was no due process granted to them. And you have this administration that's decided that they can twist and turn and bend the Constitution to their will, and yet somehow progressives are almost completely silent. You know, I was trying to watch some of the shows on MSNBC last night, and nobody even touched upon it. They're so busy talking about Mitt Romney and Donald Trump and birtherism that nobody cares about this.
Right. Well, no, in the defense of some progressives, I think, you know, I get voicemails and emails from people who say, you know, if the progressives aren't coming out against this, they're just not really that progressive, right? And making the argument that kind of the true progressives are very vocally and very clearly against both the assassination of Osama bin Laden, which that goes even further, I think, than more progressives or self-proclaimed progressives have a problem with the kill list than specifically with the operation against Osama bin Laden specifically. But when we step back for a second and look at this more broadly, what are the implications as far, and neither one of us are attorneys, but when we look at international law as far as assassinations, could there not be huge problems for Obama here?
Yeah, I think there would be huge problems here. And, you know, in terms of you bring up the Osama bin Laden raid, I think that it makes more sense. It would make more sense to me that people would be more upset about this when it's violating our specific constitution than they would be about the Osama bin Laden raid, whereas there was Pakistani sovereignty, you know, that was in question. But this is the entire problem that so many critics out there, so many legal scholars are trying to bring up, is that we're stepping into this entirely new realm of warfare in which there's a very big legal gray area because you have these drone strikes that are sometimes, you know, if you want to talk about Pakistan, if you want to talk about Yemen, they're happening in conjunction with, you know, with the permission of these other governments, and yet it leads to civilian deaths, you know, and especially if it's just all made in this, all the decisions are made in this one little room in the Oval Office or wherever it is in the White House that they, you know, that the president makes these decisions. I think that it should bring up a lot of legal issues, but they keep wanting to try to say that, well, these are laws of war, these are combat zones. Well, guess what? These days in this global war on terror, the entire world is a combat zone.
Yeah, I mean,
and that should be okay with international law.
It's incredible how kind of distant and compartmentalized war and fighting has become. I mean, the president has a list. It's almost like looking through your baseball cards. I saw one analogy where he looks through this list of people, he signs off, and then someone else who also is presumably just sitting in a room might use a drone controlled across the other side of the world to drop a bomb. We're so distant from the realities of what's happening.
No, it's very, very true, and it's especially disturbing if you think about some of the decisions that they have to make. For example, there was also this revelation in the New York Times piece that the way that the Obama administration gets around having to count as many civilian casualties is they count any male who is of military age in a combat zone, which, as we said, now is the entire world. They don't count them as a civilian death, right? They try to just throw it in, and so and at the same time, you have parts of the piece where they start to make decisions based on, well, if we get this one guy and his wife and his children just happen to be in the same place, that's just collateral damage. It was worth getting the guy. And you can see, that there's a lot of disagreement even with the advisors, the people that are surrounding the president on this, when they talk about this whack-a-mole strategy. Well, great, you got the #2 al-Qaeda guy today. Guess what? There's going to be a new one tomorrow. And this is working as a recruiting method, right? I mean, you have this president come in and try to fix the tarnished image of the United States after the Bush administration with Guantanamo Bay, with torture on our record. But now what's happening instead is that these drone strikes are only, proving as a propaganda tool for jihadists out there. I mean, the Frontline did a great documentary last night about al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in Yemen. And, they went to the place where Anwar al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son was killed by a drone strike. Then they go to this propaganda booth where AQAP is passing out all of their materials, and there's a giant poster there with pictures of Anwar al-Awlaki and his son that are being used to call them martyrs and to recruit more people. So we're only really hurting ourselves.
To talk politics on this, just for the last thought on this, Romney can't really use this against Obama, right? Because if he does, it just makes him appear weak on national defense, something which, by the way, he kind of already is in danger of appearing. But this actually is not something that Romney can almost even really mention, because this is kind of the Republican would have done strategy.
Well, there we go back into this entire problem of why aren't progressives speaking out? And that's because when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to war on terror policies, there's complete bipartisan agreement on this. So, of course, Romney can't go after the president because this is exactly what Republicans would want. And now even Democrats somehow are scared to do it because the president is just espousing these Republican policies. And it's just becoming, a very scary mix where there's bipartisan agreement on these things all the time. We see the same thing at home if you want to talk about our civil liberties, and it comes to the NDAA, when it comes to passing the Patriot Act, is that the two parties look exactly alike.
And the other thing also is that almost nobody can even really lose from this, because Obama is also not really going to lose his voters to Romney because of this, right? I mean, that's also not going to happen. In a way, we can have discussions about it. We'll have criticisms from so-called true progressives, but it's probably not going to hurt Obama either from his own side nor from the Republican side. It's almost perfect for Obama.
Yeah, no, the unfortunate thing is that nobody really cares. And if we talk about the election, of course, the thing that people care most about is the economy, and that makes sense. And foreign policy doesn't really necessarily win or lose elections for presidents. And, the thing that I would hope is that Americans just become a little more informed. For example, watching that Frontline documentary, and so they can actually start asking questions, when the Obama administration tries to claim that we are completely disintegrating al-Qaeda, that we're winning this war on terror. I wouldn't say so if you actually look at the results of these policies, but that information isn't readily available out there. And so I just think that people need to try to educate themselves more.
All right, Alyona Minkovski, host of RT's The Alyona Show. We'll be watching tonight. Great to see you again.
Thanks for having me on.